What's going on, everyone? Nick Wheeler with Almost Canon Podcast. Let's talk about giants really quick. They're a super popular topic here in the cryptozoological world. I think there's somewhat of a confusion, or I am somewhat confused. Now, there are really three major types of giants. Those would be Bigfoot, Sasquatch seem to top out at around 12 feet tall. Now, when you get taller than that, 13, 14, 15, 16 feet, that's when you seem to get into the true giant range. Now, they've been reported as being around 22 feet tall. It seems to be the tallest that they get. Very similar to Sasquatch. They look very similar, but are a different species. They seem to be. They leave behind 4-toed footprints instead of 5. You also have the Nephilim giant. Now, I don't know I'm not a Nephilim expert, but they seem to be at around, 11, 12 feet. Now, they've also been described as being, these gigantic monsters with different animal heads, eagles, lions, rams, bulls, serpents. There's a huge range of different creatures they seem to inhabit. They're both, they seem to be more of a spiritual being, but at the same time, we hear stories of things like, people or entities like Goliath, who was said to be a Nephilim giant, and he was at, 9, 10, 11 feet tall, something like that. So there's a little confusion when it comes to the Nephilim. And then we have the red-headed cannibalistic giants. Now, these are the giants that are found throughout North, Central, South America. They've been dug up out of burial mounds from, the east, the west, the south, even the southwest, as in, like the Lovelock cave giants, things like that. They're described as having this red hair. They're said to eat people, which, it's why they're described as being cannibalistic. And they seem to be, 9 to 10 feet tall seems to be really as tall as they get. Now, I've also heard stories of them being found with horns, and, especially out in like Ohio area. So where does this put the cannibalistic red-headed giant? Is it it's obviously not a Sasquatch or a true giant. They don't look anything like them. They're more human. Does this put them into the Nephilim category? Something like Goliath, not one of these serpent beings or eagle creatures. Nothing like that. But I'm talking more like Goliath. This is where I start to not exactly know what's going on. However, we do have stories like that of the Kandahar giant, which seems to be one of these red-headed cannibalistic giants. I mean, it had red hair. It was 12 feet tall. Puts it a little taller than the ones that we see here in America. But it did have red hair, and it was cannibalistic. It was eating, the American soldiers, the Afghani people who, I guess, would go around the cave, maybe, I'm assuming. It wasn't just eating American soldiers. And we recovered that. Was that a Nephilim giant? There's stories that say it was. There's stories that say it wasn't. I don't know. But that's where I'm at. Bigfoot, true giants, Nephilim, cannibalistic red-headed giants. Where do they go? I don't know, but when people talk about giants, you got to remember there's different types of giants with different types of intelligence. I can make so many more videos on this. I've tried to make it as fast as I possibly could. Let me know what you think in the comments below.